Why do we do what we do? Well, we want to help people get better lives through our property knowledge. So that's people who are vulnerable. So as I said before, homeless people, people suffering domestic abuse, we want to get them into warm, safe, comfortable houses. We want to help people who are in financial difficulty at the moment. So there's a lot of people through COVID, furlough, etc., who are perhaps struggling a bit financially and maybe find that they can't afford their mortgage and the bills. So we have ways we can help them. And then we want to help people who have got some money sitting in the bank or an ISA, and it might be earning them 0.1%, or if they're really lucky and it's on a longer notice period, 1.5% in an ISA, we can help those people get more return on that money. So this is what we do. We take houses that look like the left-hand picture and make them look like the right-hand picture. This is us. You've seen us quite a few times, I'm sure. So my husband Steve and I, we run the business, and we have subcontractors that work for us rather than direct employees. And this is how we do it. So we work with investors. If they want to be hands-on, if they want to build their own portfolio, then they will ask us to find good cash flowing properties, or properties where they can make a profit. We find them those properties and then either arrange for it to go to social housing, help them get it rented, or out with an estate agent to flip it. Or if they don't want all the hassle, they can then lend the money to our business, and we will take that process through where we buy the houses and hand them over after all the work's done. And then at the end, we will give those investors a guaranteed agreed percentage back, so they know how much they're going to earn on their money. But this is what I wanted to talk to you about more today. It's about we can help those people who are struggling financially. So there's people out there who maybe took a mortgage 2008 or just before, with the crash, when Northern Rock were offering things like 100%, 125% mortgages. So they might have very little equity in their house. They can no longer afford the mortgage, they can't afford the bills. They need to do something to move to get themselves in a better position financially. They can't sell the property, so they've got little equity, or it needs too much work. The offers that are coming in are too low, so it means they can't pay off their mortgage. So the house basically sits on the market for months. So what we do is agree a long-term rent on their property, and we agree to buy it in the future at a set price, which will cover their outstanding mortgage. Depending on the situation, we may pay some money up front, or we will pay all the money at the end. We have to have a consideration at the start to make it a legal agreement. But we also pay the estate agent's fees for them. All the monthly outgoings that they've been responsible for, they're no longer responsible for, because we pay the mortgage, we pay any bills, we pay council tax until we put a tenant in. And as the market improves over time, the value of the house will go up sufficiently to let us buy it at a price that lets the mortgage get paid off. So the purpose is that the person no longer has debt, they no longer have arrears, they're in a much better position and can move on with their lives. So this is one that we did, well, back in 2019 now. It's a 3-bed semi that was in Shipley. This is how it looked when we viewed it. We viewed it in May, advertised at 75,000. We offered the full asking price, but it was rejected because the vendor said it wasn't enough to pay off his outstanding mortgage, which was 82,000. He had £6,500 worth of arrears. His mortgage payments were £800 a month. He had council tax, £130 a month, and the cost to do the work was around 20k. What he didn't say initially, but what we then found out, was he'd had a repossession letter, and the bailiffs were due at 11:45 on the Thursday, and this was the Tuesday. So we're like, okay, we can help you, but we've got to move quick. So what we did, we went to see the vendor, we sat down, we talked to him to find out if we could help. We then spoke to the lender with him to explain how we could help. We contacted specialist solicitors to act for him and to act for us. And in this instance, because of his financial situation, we paid for both sets of solicitors. We agreed what we call a heads of terms, so the solicitors could draw up a proper agreement, and that was how long we would have the agreement for, what price we would pay for the house once we've refurbished it, etc., and that we would pay all those fees that we just mentioned. We even paid to photocopy his ID, to send it recorded delivery, because literally he was struggling to do that. So we negotiated with everybody. We pushed all of the parties involved to keep everyone on track, because we had to meet that deadline of stopping the bailiffs coming. So part of the agreement was that we paid off his arrears. We had to pay off his arrears before they would stop the bailiffs, but we couldn't pay off his arrears until all the contracts were signed, because otherwise we'd have paid £6,500 with no security that the deal would go ahead. That meant that on the Wednesday we would pay the arrears, but everybody thinks like when you pay through the bank it's immediate. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It can take 24 hours. So Wednesday afternoon, 24 hours was too late to stop the bailiffs. So we're like, well, what do you want us to do? Do we take a bag of cash with £6,500 into the bank? Because that's the only way we can guarantee you will get the money in time. In the end, they agreed that as long as we could prove we'd sent the money, they'd call the bailiffs off. These are things that you don't realise when you go into this kind of situation. We actually went and stood on the doorstep on the Thursday morning, just in case the bailiffs turned up, to prove that they should no longer be there. We then gutted, refurbished the property to sell it. We eventually sold it. There were some delays due to COVID and all the lockdown situation. And we learned a lot from what we did. So here's some pictures of the property. This is how it looked when we viewed it, when we turned up. Every surface was covered in nicotine. Everything was covered in nicotine. We felt like we were covered in nicotine every time we went in. It really, really stunk of nicotine. The garden was a mess. The guy hadn't had a chance, or hadn't had the money or even the urge to do anything to it because of his situation, which is completely understandable. So this is all the work that we had to do to make the property sellable. Here are some before and after pictures. So tried to get them pretty much the same angle. So you can see how the house was when we took it over. And then once we'd refurbished it, and our daughter has a staging company, so she put all the furniture in to stage it, how it looked when it went on the market.
You got
for a first-time buyer. Some other pictures here, the bedrooms and outside. So we gave it more curb appeal. We had some challenges. Build team weren't great. The rewiring set the consumer unit on fire because it hadn't been done properly the first time. There were things that we learned about off-road parking and the demand for that. And like I say, we had the delays, which ended up costing us more money. But the positive was we helped that person get into a far better situation, move out of financial difficulty, and get into a position where he could move on with his life. We also do social housing. So I just wanted to show you some pictures because I've talked about it an awful lot in the past. This was the very first property we handed over to social housing. So you can see how it was when we got it and how it was when we handed it over. So these are just a few pictures because sometimes it's nice to look at the nice things. Okay, so really I want, if you know anybody who's struggling, anybody in financial difficulty where they can't pay off the mortgage, they can't afford to do the house up, please do put them in touch and let's see if we can help them, because that way it helps them, it helps us, and it helps potentially a social housing person at the end when we can give them that warm, safe, comfortable home. Thank you. Any questions?
Incredible. You've got about 20 seconds left, so we might not have time for questions.
I've got a question. Oh, have we not got time for questions, did you say?
We can have time for one. Go for it.
Oh, I was just wondering, so you paid 65 for that property and you paid was it 65? And you paid
75.
75, sorry,
yeah.
And £6,500 in arrears. And then what did you sell it for?
117.
Brilliant. So you made quite a nice, so 20 grand doing it up. So
it ended up being a little bit more than 20 grand. And we had we were paying all the mortgage that time. So we had £800 of the mortgage for 12 months we ended up paying.
You didn't come away with that much.
Lending it out. So we about broke even on that one. We'd hope we would make a little bit on the end, but we about broke even. But we helped somebody get in a better situation.
Brilliant. Thank you.